Hi, how are you today? For this video, we will be talking about the concept of post-structuralism or the theory of deconstruction, in opposed to the last video we have, the structuralism. But before anything else, let's have the intro. Before diving deep in this theory, let's have a short glimpse back to its history. Post-structuralism began in the early 19th century but became popular in 1960s, displacing structuralism. This was also ended in 1970s. Among the many proponents of post-structuralism, I would like to mention Roland Barthes and Jacques Derrida as prominent in this field. Roland Barthes was confirmed structuralist, but somehow he still opposed its idea and later published his The Death of the Author in 1968, wherein he mentioned that the author is not the prime source of the work or piece, but instead the readers. On the other hand, Jacques Derrida, a French author of the paper Structure, Sign, and Play in the Discourse of the Human Sciences, and who founded and regarded as father of Deconstructionism or post-structuralism, greatly opposed the limitations provided by structuralism, and additionally, he pointed out that language is unstable. Now, in this video, we will try to simplify the main concepts that post-structuralism wanted to convey. Let's start from this. I will try to show you different pictures and concepts and try to describe or define it in your own terms. Let's begin. What can you say about this first picture? How about this one? Family. How about school? Books. And lastly, we have dog. So, have you defined them? Do you think all of you have the same interpretation of the same picture and concept? If structuralists will answer it, they would say yes, because there is a universal meaning for all of that, that a word apple might signify something that is a fruit, etc., together with a family that is commonly composed of a mother and a father, and together with their children, something like that. On the other hand, post-structuralists would answer it differently. They would rather say that no, our answers may vary because we have different knowledge about this concept. A family, for him, is something that may composed of parents and children, but for me, a family could be something that describes more by its bond and not just by blood. That a pet could be also a part of the family, etc., something like that. The same with the idea of the apple. For someone, it could be just a fruit that we eat. But for another, it may refer to something more, like the symbol of the first sin. Because for other people, this is the fruit of the first sin where Adam and Eve were prohibited from eating it. So it goes to symbolism. In this regard, if structuralism only abide with the idea of sign, which is composed of a signifier and a signified, post-structuralism is somehow go far beyond the symbol, which has a historical view and perspective. For instance, when I ask your name, and I answer, my name is Zeus. In return, you may ask, why? Why Zeus? And I can explain that my mother loves mythology, especially Greek. That is why she named me after the king of gods, which is Zeus. In this stand, there is a historical concept in it, in the name itself. So Derrida believes that there is no absolute meaning. That an apple will just be something that we eat because it is a fruit, but for others it may not. Or even a dog will forever be a bird, or for others it could represent the idea of hope and purity and even God. Something like that. With these concepts, let us summarize it into its basic tenet. Generally, this theory has one basic thought, that is, literature can have no singular meaning. Or in simple terms, a concept or word may give us different meanings and not just a single one. Because in contrast to structuralism, that there is definite meaning, post-structuralism defies it by stating that meaning is not absolute and it is constantly changing. As mentioned earlier, that this theory replaces authors to readers, and that idea is not only centralized on the author but also on the readers. And since readers have different knowledge about a word or concept, therefore meanings may vary on the reader's perception. Thus, it may generate different interpretations. That is why meaning is not absolute, that an apple may be interpreted differently based upon the context, and of course, on the understanding or knowledge of the readers. This idea is also supported by the theory of difference. This theory refers to the process of deriving meaning from other words by looking on its difference. Against the metaphysics of presence, this theory rather looks on the absence, and that concept is not centralized, as what referred to logocentrism. Difference, with an A, which conveys differ and differ. Hence, meaning found in words difference from other words, and that meaning is infinitely deferred or constantly changing, because as long as there is meaning, there is difference. Because from words' differences, we can get meaning. For example, color only exists as a concept because people differentiate it from size and shape and so on. Furthermore, that is why post-structuralism is commonly a philosophical movement rather than a linguistic one, which is based on individual knowledge, and since everyone is different, meanings will also vary. This leads us to the very idea that nothing is fixed, that the concept of signified and signifier of saussure is not stable, that a signifier will conceptualize through its signified, which in turn, this signified becomes signifier of another signified and so on, that the word apple will give us a signified of this, but this signified could also give us another interpretation or symbol based on our knowledge. That is why post-structuralism does not believe in binary opposition, like the idea of night and day, bad and good. That when we take away the other concept, the other will also lose its meaning. Post-structuralists defy this thought. They do not believe in this kind of relationship. For instance, if there is only day and night, then how about the dawn, twilight, or dusk? Or the occurrence of LGBTQ community, that there is not only a male and female, but there also come the existence of LGBTQ community, that a female could also have a male attribute and vice versa. Another vital concept in this theory is that speech and writing are complementary. Structuralists believe that speech is somehow superior to writing, but post-structuralists believe that they are complementary, that there is no superior among them, it just they work together. However, post-structuralism regards most as textual analysis. To explain it, in speaking, we can easily spot the context or meaning of the idea. For instance, when I told you you are so kind, one can easily say that I am referring to you as someone who is kind. But in writing, you need to analyze first the text before coming up to the idea of you or who is the one being referred to. That is why this theory regards both writing and speaking that can be a basis for analyzing the text. The very idea of an individual reading and analyzing is the concept of this theory. That again, since readers have different knowledge and understanding of the text, there could be different meanings to be interpreted from it. And that is also why post-structuralism fell on the idea of reader-response theory. So how are we going to interpret one literary text? Typical questions such as, sometimes there are indeed stories that you may thought as tragic, but somehow differ its genre by portraying different events that is not universally seen or fit in the genre, for instance, of tragedy. But the point is, it is possible. Another idea, knowing that most fairy tales ends in a happy ever after, like Cinderella, Snow White, and so on. And that there is this prince who always saved them or rescued them from a monster or an evil stepmom, for instance. If you have watched the first video about structuralism, that by looking at a genre, we can then analyze the overall structure, thus the meaning of the piece. But what if this fairy tale we knew suddenly changed? That instead of a prince saving the princess, the story turned differently. And at worst, what if it does not become a happy ending story? This is what entails by post-structuralism, that nothing is permanent, and that meaning is not absolute, that a genre itself can possibly change and develop throughout times. Again, that is the very concept of post-structuralism, that there can be no absolute meaning or center for every idea, but it is boundless and ever-changing. Another way to analyze a text is by identifying its theme and find places in the text where these themes are playing out by looking at the contextual keywords present in the story. Let's take the novel of Oscar Wilde's novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, as an example. By reading the novel, the major theme revolves around the idea of time. The major character, Dorian Gray himself, found a way to escape death to have an everlasting beauty and youth. The perception of time here by Dorian himself and by other characters are quite different. For others, time is what defines their age. But for Dorian, the word seems to lack a trace. Why? I take it is only a word to Dorian Gray, a word without an opposite and therefore without meaning. Using post-structuralism in analyzing literary piece is quite simple. Just take the idea of reading. When we read, we try to imagine things the way we understand the text, thus using our knowledge we have to come up to such imagination and understanding. But for others, they may imagine differently from yours. A dove, for instance, again, is just a bird for you. But for others, it may symbolize peace, wisdom, and God. That's because you didn't have the idea that it could possibly use in that way. Once again, that is post-structuralism, that meanings are varied differently because humans have different ideas, knowledge, and experiences that may affect their understanding of the word, concept, or text. This gives way to the idea that meaning is not absolute and that it is constantly changing. If language is absolute, then a tree, or the concept of a tree, would be forever a concept of just a tree, and that there's no more concept to be applied in it. Structuralism believes that language and the world stands apart, that language labels the world and it doesn't have an inherent or innate reason why it was called that way, that a cat is cat and not a dog. Hence, structuralism is not conformed in such reality because, as you see, the world is the reality And whatever happening inside the world, in this world, is the reality, right? But since structuralism believes that language and the world stands apart and that they are independent, that they can stand alone, that they are different things, that language is not part of the reality, it just labels the world. On the other hand, post-structuralism opposes to this idea that meanings are everywhere. And if we look on the reality in the world we are living right now, there is so much potential that a single word may bring. That the phrase, I love you, for instance, does not just have a single meaning, but it depends upon on how a man or how an individual says it. It could be a fake one, it could be a friendly one, or it could be a real one. In short, meaning will not stay the way it is because it is changing. Symbols, irony, paradoxes, and metaphors should be applied in the world when finding meanings. Language empowers us, and it should not limit us. There you go. There are still a lot of things to learn for this theory, but I think this is the very concept that post-structuralism wanted us to understand. Once again, thank you for watching and listening.